Good evening, everyone. Time for episode 12 of The Drums of Doom, part 2 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga, by me. Starting on page 138, we return to Carmen's Rangers in their battle against the monsters in a fistful of dung. Okay. Tarek, Dartin said, "It's not alone." Struggling to gain some kind of control, he soon found himself helplessly trapped up to his neck in the mud. To his horror, a second beast approached him beneath the pool's black surface, displacing the muck of its home as it wound its way toward him with savage speed. Frantically groping through the mire for his sword's hilt, he found that his fall had lifted the scabbard away from his body, and he couldn't draw it forth against the weight of his surroundings. He tried to prepare his dagger, but it was too late. Surely this is no way for a warrior of Odin to die, he thought. Groping for his knife, the beast's malevolent eye-stalk appeared above the surface. Fear gripped his heart, for he was defenseless before a starving, deadly creature. Terrible tentacles buffeted his head, grasped his body, and pulled him irresistibly towards its slavering maw. Despite the weight of his body and the mass of the mud around him, the creature pulled him in with the ease of a hunting cat toying with its prey. Struggling against its tentacles with all his might was not enough. It was clear to him then that this was his last battle. Leander was more fortunate because he'd landed behind Dartin and he was being ignored by both creatures. When he searched for his sword's hilt, he soon found it, and he was able to draw it forth. Where his blade met the fecal quagmire, steam erupted, because Atron Doru was a legendary blade, and its very nature repelled the malignant filth around itself. Up and up he raised his sword, and a tremendous thunderclap was heard by all, for here was Stormbringer, and above them all, billowing clouds began to form, summoning forth the tempest and all its rage. Unfortunately for Carmen's party, the horrible beasts cared little for the clap of thunder or the forming clouds. Their craving was for the salty taste of living flesh and the satisfying crunch of marrow-filled bones. It was a motivation that no storm could assuage, and their stomachs had been empty for far too long. Dreadful they were, with monstrous, salivating mouths filled with flesh-rending teeth, and their very breaths reeked of refuse and gore. The largest and mightiest of the beasts saw its two closest victims. Rushing in, it attacked with a frenzy brought on by its irresistible hunger. Out and out its tentacles flailed, and although both of its arms felt the sting of its prey's weapons, they could withstand much. They could withstand much more, and each entwined another victim. Taking a firm hold of them, it brought the first one down toward its gaping, festering maw. Its hunger would soon be appeased. Carmen and Kerr fought valiantly to defend themselves, but without entering the deep mud, they couldn't damage the beast's body. They cut the tentacles in many places, while dodging this way and that to avoid being grasped, but the attack was too sudden, too unpredictable. They were entwined, squeezed, and hoisted aloft. Its arms were immensely powerful and suction-cupped, like the terrible whips of a giant squid. They quickly discovered that mortal strength alone was not enough to escape. Kerr's right hand still held Korin Koth, his anger growing with his frustration, but the tentacle clung to him like the unyielding arms of an ogre, and his left arm was hopelessly pinned beneath its grasp. Before he was aware of what near fate awaited him, he was suddenly before the creature's mouth, and only his iron-shod boots prevented him from being immediately drawn in and devoured. He knew from the teachings of his youth that these monsters were cunning, and it proved to be woefully true, because each time that he swung his axe, the beast twisted his body about, thus preventing him from landing any solid blows. Searching through the maelstrom for Carmen, he was terrified. Both of her arms were pinned, and more horribly, she was being bashed against the cavern wall in its attempt to subdue. subdue her. She was holding on, trying to brace against each impact, but she was tiring. He prayed for a weakening of the beast's irresistible grasp, or at least some stroke of luck. He struggled on. Dartin barely felt it as the beast began tearing through his body armor like a seagull feasting upon a defenseless crab. His hazy thoughts were strangely detached, for he could take no defensive action. The creature had his arms and head firmly entwined, and only Odin's mercy saved him from feeling its probing teeth and crushing jaws. He knew that he was dying. Atron Daru hummed with gathering power. It was a blade forged with the elemental power of the storm, a self-aware, magical creation that could call down bolts of lightning from the unnatural storms it created. Leander, it said, the power of the heavens is now yours to command. But it might kill him. He is surely dead if we don't strike now. Leander was trapped by the mud as certainly as any of them. If he sent a bolt of lightning towards the monster, he might kill himself and Dartin as well. He looked on with revulsion as the creature methodically pried away his friend's armor in its unrelenting feeding frenzy. He had only moments to act, but there was no clear answer, no way of knowing if his magic could save or doom them. If the smaller beast had continued to feed upon him, the Dartin would surely have died, but Odin's most faithful follower was not alone. Dao stood upon the rocky shore surrounding the pool of guano with an arrow fitted to his bow, waiting for an opportunity to fire. The positions of his friends had prevented a safe shot, but Dartin was beyond the need for such consideration. Dao sent his vengeful shafts there. In seconds, his bow sang twice, and the beast was hit high in its body, and again in its rightmost tentacle. The sudden pain angered the creature, so that it launched Dartin high over its head and onto the steps, leading up and out of the cavern. He fell hard upon the stairs, his limp body never moving during its flight, nor upon its landing. It appeared that Dartin, warrior priest of Odin, was dead. The injured monster sank beneath the muddy surface of its home, with only its single eye showing above the dark pool. It advanced toward its shore-bound antagonists. Its writhing eye stalk was a difficult target, and beneath the muck of its home, its food's barbs could not reach it. The largest beast was enjoying its game with its small morsel. Its prey was growing weaker beneath its toothed assault, and its crushing grip was slowly driving the air from its lungs. It would only be a few moments before it would feast. While the battle ensued, Kalor had wasted no time in acting. Opening Modrul's book, he opened it to a page that he knew, and lo, the book did rise before him, and with the dragon's magic coursing through him, he channeled it toward the mighty beast. The book held its power within the very runes that had been laid upon it, and when Kalor read and empowered those runes, a great bolt of energy lanced out and impacted the body of the creature. It howled in pain. Kalor didn't know if it had been seriously hurt, but it continued to let out a hideous roar. Its single eye rolled about in a maddened frenzy of animal rage. When Kalor again looked upon the page from which he had read, all the runes of power were gone. Caught in the beast's numbing grasp, Kerr was growing weaker with loss of breath, but when Kalor's bolt struck it, the monster's grip loosened for a brief instant, while Kerr was being held right before its mouth. With a mighty battle cry, Korin Koth lashed out, smashing through the body and upper jaw of the beast. But the monster was far from finished, and with a great pull, it plunged Kerr deep inside of its terrible mouth. When it tried to bite down upon its spiteful meal, its wounded maw could no longer close properly, and Kerr's hard dwarven body proved the stronger. Had it feasted upon dwarves before, it may have chosen more tender fare, but it didn't realize its grievous mistake until Korin Koth struck out once more. In a scream of blackish blood and gore, Kerr struck again and again with all the might in his single right arm. Kurragoth bit deeply, and the beast reared up in agony. It hurled the prey in its left tentacle against the stone wall behind itself. Now, instead of trying to devour the dwarf, it tried to extract him, and Kerr found himself being spit out and pushed away. Dwarfs were too troublesome to eat. With a shake and a shudder, the monster submerged itself and advanced grimly toward the other two victims still floating in the pool. Tarek and Karina helplessly watched the battle unfold around themselves. Floating between Leander and the largest creature, they could manage nothing other than drawing closer to one another. Back to back, they each drew their blades. Karina held her long sword above the mud, and Tarek his two long ranger's knives. If they were to be eaten, they'd not go without a fight. Seeing that his arrows could do little more good, Dow prepared his rope and grappling hook. Tying one end off to a large protruding stone, he then swung the grapnel end over end, aiming for a point within arm's reach of them. His actions were frantic, because upon his right he could see the largest monster rushing toward them, yet before him came the second beast with a great wave of dung, like a large fish slicing through the surface of a still pond. He had only seconds to act. Hurling his grapnel and line as safely near to them as he could, he shouted, "Grab hold!" Bracing himself, he prepared to pull them in, but it was too late. The creature was upon him. Carmen was sorely stunned by the devastating impact. The cavern's wall proved to be quite unyielding, and her breath was blasted from her lungs. The fall to the ground was only slightly less jarring, and she lay there for a moment, wondering if her death was near. Looking toward the battle, Kerr floated just beyond her reach. His face color was an odd mixture of red, black, and blue. She couldn't tell if it was the result of pain or anger or both, but he was barely moving and seemed to be gasping for air. She wanted to help him. She wanted to help the others. Rolling over, she tried to rise, like an underdog fighter with a champion's heart. Upon the wall, she clawed her way back up. To her left, she spotted her bow, as yet unbroken. With her sword and shield, she was a great fighter, but with Cloudseeker in her hands, she was a deadly archer as well. Step by step, she waited for it. Soon these beasts would pay. Tarek and Karina were embattled. Side by side now they tried to hack at the monster, but most of its body was submerged and difficult to strike. Its savage tentacles flailed and tore at them, while what was left of its mouth attacked their legs. Slowly, they were being bitten and beaten into submission, but suddenly, the beast went into a terrible frenzy. Great bolts of light were smashing into it from the shore. Ordinary arrows were useless in the mud, but Cloudseeker's arrows were partly material, partly energy, and they burned through the mud with contempt. The roar of the submerged creature was dreadful. In mindless agony, it lashed out at its two closest antagonists. It was then that Atrandaru struck, beginning with a maelstrom of wind and rain, blinding and cold, and then its lightning arced down, striking the sword-bearer's chosen foe. The electrical charge erupted through the monster's body, and its very eye stalk was blown from its body. In a final frenzy of involuntary motion, it shuddered and finally lay still. The mud absorbed much of the killing energy, but Tarek and Karina were still too close. They were burned and shocked and hurtfully stunned. Grievously hurt, Karina could do little more than cling to Tarek as if he was an island in a shark-infested sea. His muscles rebelled against his will, but he was strong, especially so for an elf, and he strove mightily to pull him to safety. His side burned, a searing pain like salt in a wound, only worse. The pain might have stopped a lesser man, but it only fueled his resolve. Screaming, mostly on the inside, he pulled, hand over hand, fearing for a moment that she might let go, but her grip was iron desperate. Slowly, he drew them both to shore. "Come on then," Dow taunted. "Come here, you miserable wretch. My sword awaits." Fighting valiantly, he scored many hits on the beast and its tentacles, but his sword was only one, and the creature's arms too. Finally subdued, his sword arm pinned, he was then lifted up and drawn toward the creature's black foaming mouth. Struggling to break free, he knew that he was losing. The tentacle's grip was crushing, relentless. In an instant he would be devoured. The beast's bloated eye floated before him, clearly eager for the taste of fresh meat. Anticipating the pain of the first killing bite, he screamed. If Tao had seen past his all-consuming fear, he would have known that his friends, even then, were striving to save him. In a burst of white-hot energy, Kalor hurled his own spell at the creature. Leander called another bolt of lightning, and Cloudseeker's streaking missiles slammed into it. The Dung beast was wholly consumed. Tao was lucky. The monster dropped him in its agony, and he felt none of the titanic energies that had been unleashed. Knee-deep in the mud, he shielded his eyes from the white-hot fires and leaped away. When he looked back, all that was left was a blackened, smoking carcass, pouring forth the smells of rot and corruption. Carmen, do you see any more of them? No, but get everyone out of here fast. Holding Cloudseeker at full draw, she scanned the cave for signs of life. Above her, wind-blown storm clouds continued to rain, energy crackling within them. The monsters were clearly dead, their bodies consumed by bolt and flame. Besides her comrades, nothing stirred within the pool. Kalor, help them. Let's get everyone together. I'm going to check on Dartin. Hold on, Tarek, Tao said. Don't let her go. Don't worry about that, Tarek gasped. She's got quite a grip. Kalor could feel Tao's body tremble as they pulled in the rope. Are you okay? I'm a little shaken up, Kalor. It's not every day that you almost get eaten. Give me your hand, Tarek, Kalor said. I've got you. Dragging them to the safety of solid rock, the four of them just lay there for a moment, catching their breaths and appreciating the cooling rain. Are you all right, mon cher? Tao asked his wife. I don't think so. I hurt all over. Just rest for a minute. I've got to get to Keg and Leander into shore. The battle over, Leander still floated in the refuse, his sword glowing like a miniature sun. Incredible. Thank you, it replied. You didn't tell me you could do that. I have many secrets and many things to teach you. Once you learn the secrets of the Druids, you will no longer need me to use the power. It was then that Tao's rope landed in front of him. We'll have to talk later. I've got to put you away for now. Very well, Acolyte. Once sheathed, the storm quickly diminished and then was gone. Dartin, Leander called. Where are you? He's down, Tao said, lying upon the far stairs. Carmen's going to him. Let's get you and Keg out, and then we'll go check on them. How bad is he? Tao! It looks bad, Ash, but we don't know anything for sure yet. Working together, Tao and Kalor pulled him out. Thanks. Are you hurt? I feel wretched and smell worse, but nothing seems broken. When you lads get tired of chewing the fat, Kerr said, maybe you could get me the hell out of here. Right away, Corporal, Kalor said by way of an old habit. Hurry up, Private. I've had enough of this floating around. Dartin needs our help. Tossing a rope to him, they had him out in short order. You're bleeding. A few of his teeth got through, but I'll live, as long as the wasting sickness doesn't take me. Wasting sickness? These creatures, Kerr said, carry a disease. If you're bitten, chances are that you'll die within a few days. You mean there's no cure? Oh, there are cures. One of them is lying on those stairs, and the other grows in certain places under earth. I found some in this very cave, but we had better pray that there is more in here. Once we have cared for Dartin, we'll need to look for a wrinkled green fungus like this and a blue-green mold. If we can't find any, then we had better hope that the priest is alive, or most of us will soon join him. Come quickly, Carmen shouted. Quickly! Her last call was abrupt. Her hands had flown to her mouth in fear and horror. Dartin lay before her, his body unmoving as his life's blood flowed freely down the stairs and into the corruption. Those of them that were able slogged through the last expanse of dung to help. They gently rolled him over. His body was ruined, a horror that none of them would ever forget. His armor was torn from the front of his body, and his stomach and entrails had fallen out of him, torn, ragged, destroyed. My God, she cried. Leaning over him, she heard his dying breath. Dao, give me the last orc healing draught now. It might just prolong his suffering. He'll die for sure without it. If we can get him awake, maybe he can heal himself. Tilting his head forward, she carefully poured the liquid down his throat. His body convulsed, rebelling against the foreign liquid. They tried to hold him still against the agonizing waves of pain. The orc's herbs were potent, and the magic in their drink was strong. Dartin's eyes slowly opened, a dull gleam of life still lingering. He tried to speak, but only shuddered. His pain was beyond his own comprehension. The potion was just not enough. His wounds were far beyond its power to heal. Dartin, he thought that he heard. You've got to hang on. Pray, damn you. Don't give up now. You've got to try. Squeezing him tightly to her breast, as if will alone could save him, Carmen wept while the last of Dartin's life ran out. Death's mercy had brought him past the pain, his body now a useless broken vessel. He knew where he was, standing at the top of a rocky precipice, at the foot of the greatest rainbow of all, the Rainbow Bridge. Leaving his land and his friends saddened him, but he knew that his mortal fight must be over. He was ready to meet his father. Heimdall, he called. Heimdall! The mist of clouds swirled about him, cooling his skin. The bridge to Valhalla was bright and colorful, both soft and hard, on the one hand narrow and on the other infinitely wide. Standing before it, he was small indeed. Suddenly, the earth shook and the bridge quaked, and lo, striding down from the heavens was a giant, or a titan. No, it was the god Heimdall himself, with corded arms and grim visage. I heard your call, priest, but it is not yet your time. Even now, Odin himself resurrects you, and then he must sleep for a year and a day. Until he awakens, the power of the runes will not avail you. We all must pay that price. Do not dishonor his gift. Now go back. The woman warrior is calling you. He awoke in Carmen's arms, her tears falling warm upon his face. He prayed then, but his prayers went unanswered. One-Eyed Jacks. Dartin had returned to us, I said, miraculously healed before our very eyes. We all wept because we believed that death had finally come to our fellowship. That was a terrible battle, Polly said. Luck was with you. Little did we know that our hardships had only just begun. We would soon return to our journey, but while we traveled, our enemies were preparing. They had Moldrin, Eric said. How many more hostages did they need? Vlad never left anything to chance unless he had no choice. Olak's diary relates another small part of his plans and the intentions of their deadly queen. There are also a few small chapters pertaining to Ariana's courtship of Vlad. I have no idea how Olak came to witness the things that he wrote, but I think that you will find it very interesting. Olak, Draco, and Christoff. Your work was bold, Derek said with a hearty laugh, and commendable. A brewmaster's challenge of all things. After a short break, you must depart for Arundel. The three of you must locate and capture a princess of the Druids. I have never been to the new continent, Christoff said, but I need to know for what cause do we do this. The princess is not to be harmed, I assure you. She is the Halfar love of the acolyte named Leander. He wields an ancient sword of power that we require to ensure the success of our coming campaign. Hostage-taking is more along the lines of a common burglar, Christoff said. I really don't have the taste for it. I can recommend several thieves who do proficient work. That, I am afraid, is impossible. Vlad insisted that it be your team. No other souls can know of these events. I see. Though so there is, in fact, no other option than for me to comply. You will, of course, be rewarded with whatever reasonable demands that you may have. My only demand is this. When the time comes, you allow me into your group. I tire of having to walk the realm in disguise. I am wanted in every major city, with the bounty on my head in the thousands. You are already in, Christoff, Derek said, but until we are certain that our secrets will remain between us, then we must keep some things on a need-to-know basis. Well, since Apex and I have no choice, and seeing as how we would both like to keep our heads, when, where, and how do we get there? You may rest the night and prepare. At dawn, you and Apex will meet Olak and Draco in the secret chamber. We will discuss the mission there. In the meantime, Ariana will show you to your quarters. The Dark Priestess had been reading in a small study at the rear of Derek's laboratory. When she appeared, Christoff was stunned. She was everything that he thought that he had ever wanted in a woman. She was exquisitely fit, hauntingly beautiful, tall, and obviously evil. To say that he was completely smitten would have been the understatement of the century. "My lady," was all that he managed to say before executing a perfect court bow. "Christoff," she purred, "I have heard a lot about you. You have a great many exploits for a short-lived human. I have only just begun." "We'll see, Madam Minx," she jested. "But I must admit that you are far more handsome without the dress." "You wound me, my lady." "Oh, hush. Tonight you shall rest in luxury. If you desire a woman or a man, one will be provided for you." Christoff knelt before her in a knight's fashion. "Only if there is another lady in the fortress who compares to you." "That," Ariana hissed, "is impossible." "But," she said, softening, "some of the concubines are attractive after a fashion." "Well then, my lady, I would only be content with your company." "Fool! You would die before your hands ever touched my flesh." "Forgive me," he said. "I meant no harm, perhaps only the pleasure of your company over dinner." "You walk a dangerous path, Christoff, but I accept, if only to see whether or not you survive the encounter." In the spider's web. Christoff's room was luxurious. The finest furnishings, tapestries, and hand-woven rugs were all well coordinated in a relaxing and casually pleasing fashion. A well-supplied bathing room was located across from his apartment in the nearby hall, complete with hot water, a steam room, and numerous slaves to bring fresh water, towels, and a myriad of other pleasures. Laid out on the bed for him were an exquisite tunic of the finest silk, complete with new pants and undergarments. Tall boots made of some serpent's skin stood on the floor beside it, as if their owner was soon to return. Much to his surprise, everything fit perfectly. How they had managed to guess his measurements so exactly was a mystery, but like most things with these dark elves, it was a secret best left for another day. "Quite a welcome," Apex said from the hall. "We rarely sleep in such luxury." "Your room," Ariana said, "is at the end of the hall. You will find it to your liking." "I shall return for dinner at 7, Christoff. See to it that you don't smell quite so badly when I return." Her insult smote him speechless. In his younger years, he might have killed because of such disrespect, but it only made her more attractive than ever. "I'll see you soon. One of my servants shall bring you the chef's menu. You may choose my dinner as well, but choose carefully." With a casual about face, she turned and departed, leaving them alone in the hall. "Well," Apex said, "I guess that you will be off to the bath then." "Quite." "I am no mere murderer. Most of the men that I killed were bad enough to deserve it." "A noble assassin," she said. "I have never heard that." Oh, hold on, sorry. Skipped a page, beg your pardon. "Then I shall see you at dawn if your room is so plush. I can't wait to see what awaits me and mine. Good night, Apex." "Good night." Flying down the hall like some demonic balloon, he arrived at his door. "Hello, it is Apex. If anyone lies within, I could use some help with the door." Sounds of light footsteps on tile drifted up from under the door, and then a tiny, dog-like creature opened it and greeted him. "Welcome, Master Apex. I trust that we have provided well for you." Beyond him, a fiendish harem of floating females lounged above a giant lily-pad-filled pool fed by waterfalls. A table was prepared with freshly butchered meat and other revolting delicacies. Amazing, Apex drooled, just like home. And if tears of joy could have come to a floating lord's eyes, then most surely they would have. Dim the lights, little dog, dim the lights. There is only room enough on this lily pad for one bullfrog. And that's where we'll end episode 12, midway down page 152. When we return, we'll find out what happens between Christoff and Ariana when they have their dinner. And that saying, there's only room enough on this lily pad for one bullfrog, was a saying that I commonly heard in the Rangers down south in Georgia when I was supply corporal for a 3rd Ranger Battalion. And it's a funny saying that I adopted, and I've always loved it. There's only room enough on this lily pad for one bullfrog. Thank you for reading and watching, listening. Have a good night.